Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us on Saturday morning. This talk is part of Photo London's Discovery section, which this year is curated by the wonderful Charlotte Jansen. I'm Gem Fletcher. I'm a writer, editor, podcaster, and consultant. This morning, I'm thrilled to be in conversation with Birgit Glatzel, primarily working with black and white photography. Birgit works on long-form projects alongside her architecture practice, exploring ideas around relationality, togetherness, personal histories, and she uses modes of fiction and documentation to grapple with the human condition, reflecting upon who we are and how we live. Today, we're going to be talking about her 4-year project, A Friend is a Friend of a Friend, which began in 1998 and saw her make portraits around the globe of friends, their friends, and friends of their friends. The result is this fascinating body of work and a book that documents 340 people from 19 countries, and it opens up lots of really interesting conversations, both if we think about the context in which Birgit made the work, as well as now. So there's ideas of time, technology, and human connection that sort of flood all the way through the project. Birgit and I are going to talk for about 45 minutes, and then we're going to open up to questions. So please feel free to drop any questions in the Q&A function, and we will run through as many of those as we can at the end. So to kick off, Birgit, you are both an architect and a photographer.
Yes.
And I think I've told you this before, but I'm deeply fascinated by image makers who come from like an intersectional background. And I was curious if you could tell us a little bit about these two worlds and how they operate for you, and if indeed they are quite separate or if they do overlap in any way.
For me, they always run parallel. Yeah, like I can't really separate it because it's a way of thinking, of designing, of connecting with things, and yeah, so yeah, I can't really separate it in a way, and maybe it's probably because I'm quite an emotional person. Yeah, so I take architecture into an emotional space, and the same with photography, with art. And so yeah, I try to yeah, it's there. And yeah.
It's interesting. We've talked a little bit ahead of this conversation, and I know you were quite a sort of avid photographer when you were a child, but it was more passion than potentially a profession, obviously, through your sort of teenage life. But photography sort of came to you as this later sort of discovery when you were a little bit older. I wondered if you could talk about that journey and how that moment, well, how photography became an active part of your practice again, I guess.
Yeah, like it became more, of course, when I started this project in 98. As a kid, yeah, my father he had a couple of cameras, and I grew up a little bit with it because he was always the photographer of the family and he did the family photos. And so it was there, but it was more the style like, okay, we're doing here photo, please, can you stand in front of a car or a tree or I don't know. And so yeah, it was always in my family, and I got my first camera from him. Then I got another camera from my uncle, but then I had no money to pay the films, so it stopped quickly, I have to say. And then I don't know, in 98, I spoke with a friend, and then and then I told him, "Hey, listen, I just found my first film again, undeveloped, in at my parents." And I went to the photo lab and let it develop. And then he was like, "What? You started photography at the age of 11?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I was 11." And the camera was so complex to me that I overlapped one picture. Like out of one, I made 6 pictures. And yeah, and so yeah, it made me think about it, and one thing came to the other, and suddenly I found myself, buying a Rolleiflex and started that trip in a way.
Yeah, give us a little bit of context, because a friend is a friend of a friend was born out of a personal experiment. And tell us a little bit about where you were in your life then, because I feel like that's an important part of the genesis of this work. And then, yeah, a little bit about how it came into being.
Okay. Well, I was 28 and I was working as an architect, but work got slow a bit. And my personal life was completely collapsed. And then my boss was asking me, maybe can you work a bit less because we don't really have so much work. And whenever you have the chance to work less and to think more precisely about who you are, what you want from life, things start to develop step by step. And then I was at a friend and I realized, wow, I have a treasure here. My treasure are my friends and who they are and what they do. So I started to think more into this friends direction. And then it came to the point that I had to leave the city. And then I was like, fuck, I really don't want to go, but I have to. And then I was like, yeah, I should travel, but I don't really want to be a tourist, but I want to travel and work at the same time. But yeah. And then I don't know, this friend told me, hey, why don't you go to New York and Mexico City? I have friends there, and you probably can stay there and so on. And I kept it in my mind, and then I started to talk to other friends, and then suddenly I said, you know what, Andy, I want to go to New York and Mexico City. Are the contacts still available? And like this, it started. But before New York, I tripped to Paris and I photographed in one day 5 people. And so I had a warm up already in Germany, Europe, here and there. I started to photograph friends. And yeah, and then New York was the big trip. And I was, of course, very scared. I was never overseas. And I was like, oh my God. Then I will show up with this old camera. They will kick me out. And the idea was like, yeah, not to do this perfect photo shooting like what we know from with a lot of light and equipment and so on. It was just the camera, me, and the light meter, and then somehow the camera connected me and the people, because it was all blind dates. Yeah. And you show up and you say hi. And of course you want to get to know the person a bit better, and ideal-wise you spend as much time as you can. And yeah, that was the idea, to get to know the place, the person, through their stories, and maybe through stories we can have together, or like, I was open to everything. Yeah. And I just came and I said, okay, here I am, let's see what we can do. And sometimes people had 1 hour, sometimes they had 24 hours. It was it was depending on the flow. Yeah.
What were those? I'm curious, what were those first few encounters like? Did you have to find a rhythm for how you wanted to frame these encounters? Because I know you're very intuitive in the way that you like to work. And I think what makes this as a portraiture project so interesting is that you had connection in some way. They were friends of friends. Or and I wondered if that gave a level of comfort or security to both you and the people who were participating in the project.
Yeah, of course, because I knew there is a person behind that person, which I met already. Yeah, so it wasn't strangers from the street, because that could have been also an option to just, but that would have felt really awkward. Yeah, so it was like a on that level, it was secure in a way. And yeah, sometimes it was overwhelming because I was in big houses and I had no clue. I was like, damn, where should I take this photograph? And yeah, and I also was like, I only want to take maximum 8 photos. Yeah, I don't want to overcome with tons of pictures. Like I like this concentration, and I sometimes it was really dependent. Sometimes I just started somewhere because you don't know. I checked the light. The light was always very helpful, and I started to talk also with my model about like, hey, do you have an idea? Maybe you have a specific corner. And sometimes they had an idea. They were really like, yeah, here. And sometimes they gave me back the ball, and I was like, okay. But yeah, it was like I just started. It's like when you have a painting, like when you want to paint, you have this white canvas in front of you. The best is just to start, and sometimes you start with something easy, so you do the background, yeah, and this is yeah. Sometimes you drink first a glass of water to start the day with something easy.
Maybe we could bring some of the photos up actually, so people can see while we're talking some of the portraiture. Yeah. When was the turning point where you knew this was going to become a long-term project? Was there a sort of epiphany moment like that, or was it more of a organic thing and you just kept going until you didn't?
Actually, it was in London, I think. In '99, I went first to London, and I have been already in Mexico and New York, and people were asking me, where do you go next? And I understood, okay, I have to set a plan, a journey plan, and a time plan. And so after this big trip, I understood, hey, it's functioning somehow. There's trust. Yeah, people trust me, I trust them. This is actually what we see here. This is Amy in New York. It's like from this first trip. And I was helping her to put on some artwork, for example. And this was a former ballet studio she was living in. So yeah, coming back to like, I understood it's functioning, and in London I was like, okay, that is super crazy. I can go no matter where I want and I will find the contacts, because these friends of mine and their friends, they are so like, I understood I enter here into some bigger picture of the world, and I just have to say what I want and it will come to me. So after that, I planned a 4 years trip. And it was very important to me to do, because it was from 1998 to 2002. And by that time, people did projects until the year 2000. Everybody was going for the millennium, and there was this super hype and pressure about it. And I was saying to myself, I don't want to enter this. I want to go beyond. I was hoping that the world will not collapse due to computer problems. So I decided I do it 4 years, and I made a master plan, and I set everything after London, I think, yeah.
So could you explain to people how kind of I think you call them lines or like lineages of the project works? Because the project's kind of made up of a set number of lines which connect certain people together, which spread across different places, spaces, countries. Could you just give us an example of maybe one of those lines and how those lines evolved in real time?
Let's say the structure started differently, yeah, because I couldn't like, there's 2 options. One option is to have the travel plan and to say, okay, in June 2001 I will be in Iceland and so on. But I couldn't follow one person, because for this you need a lot amount of money, and to say, okay, you sent me to Brazil, I go to Brazil, then I go to Tokyo, and then I go to Australia. This I couldn't do. So what I did was I collected minimum 3 people for each city, then the ball played, or the shootings continued in the city. And I did all, like, I was writing down how everybody is connected, like I had a system, like an analog system, writing down, friend is connected to da, 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 da. And just after I started to develop the graphics, because like I was drawing huge maps. It's again, how do you start such a thing? I started with the trips. I had a trip map, which became later, when I decided to exhibit it, it became a work by itself, like tape art or painted, like it depends on the spaces where it's shown. And the lines, it was like, I needed to find a system. How can I communicate it with my friends who were helping me with the exhibition, and to bring this whole into a form, yeah. So I don't know how is it understood in a way, or
Yeah, definitely. I think it's so interesting how the project evolved, and it makes total sense, like the economics of making work and how that would shape, how that sometimes dictates form or process. I think that's really interesting.
exactly.
One thing I really wanted to ask you is, did you discover a lot about your friends through meeting their friends?
Well, yes and no. It's like I was quite astonished how careful the friends selected the friends they recommended, because they were really thinking who would be, because I just did phone call. I was in a place, and I was in Mexico City, and I did phone calls, yeah. And so there wasn't much of preparation, and I called, hi, I'm Birgit, I'm doing this and that, I'm a friend of ABC, and would you like to join the project? So as they went through this process, they choose quite well who I can contact. And yeah, I was really, I don't know, I was positive surprised about the openness, what I could find, like these two people. This is in Hong Kong. I mean, it was probably a morning shooting, yeah. And they decided to play the Muppets in their bed, yeah. That was always the best, you know, and this, you cannot direct this, yeah. And that showed a lot, in a way, about the friends I met and those who they recommended, because total openness. And yeah, like in the moment I packed out the camera, things were happening, yeah. So yeah, I can say I have lovely friends who are open to new things, and who are not very fixed in their state of mind, in a way.
Yeah, I quite like how your friends are really co-collaborators on this project, because they
Yeah.
did make certain decisions that put you on a certain pathway, which is quite interesting. But
Yeah.
also, this image is a brilliant one to talk about, because I think we'll talk about technology and connection a lot through our conversation. But one of the things that strikes me so much about this body of work is that although you only made it 20 years ago, our lives are so different now. And speaking to this image particularly, like, our lives are so curated now. We're so conscious of image because we are constantly getting it reflected back to us through likes or through Zoom conversations and seeing our faces all the time. We're like constantly in this kind of ever never-ending cycle of like seeing our own reflection or seeing how people perceive us, but then constantly trying to curate that experience, whether that's through social media or the different ways we present our identity now. But there's something so loose in these images, and free, and kind of I guess all together, when you go through the book, there's this sort of, and you write anecdotes about this throughout the book as well, in terms of your encounters, but it really celebrates like the uncanny, the bizarre, the playful, the irreverent things that people do when they were less conscious of image. Not that they weren't conscious of image at all, but I think we probably all agree that we're in quite a different state now in terms of how we think about personal identity and how we present ourselves, but there's something just so playful and loose about this image. It feels like maybe it was made 100 years ago, not 20.
Yeah, I don't know. I love it. It was totally unexpected. I didn't know them. Yeah. And I know the guy was an actor. The story behind this is actually quite big because I flew to, this is in Hong Kong, and I flew to Hong Kong. I first stayed in a hostel on Mount David, yeah, and I walked through the jungle to get to the city. And then I managed to stay at friends Evelyn and Cristiano. And Evelyn was applying to the film school in LA, and she was doing a movie, and I was helping with that movie. I entered and I was holding the light, for example, and Ricardo in the background was an actor in that movie. And so that was actually perfect how things should happen, because I stayed at their house. I was part of their project, and at the same time I could photograph some of them from some of this friend circle. And so yeah, so here I was already, I had a how you say, I had a pre-connection already. And but it's not a must that something like that will come out. Yeah. And what is nice about doing analog photography is that you come with a value. You're not just clicking. It's this value. It's a huge process. You get a negative, and then you don't know. I mean, you travel, and I was having undeveloped films with me for 2-3 months, and then just when I came back, I went to my photo lab and it got developed. So the unknown also, and the value, you come, you do all this effort to meet, and you come with this camera, you carry it around. And I don't know, probably, I guess for many of the people I photographed and I met, it was very special, and they do not forget until today. Yeah, somehow it's present in their back mind somewhere, because it was a bit crazy. Yeah. And yeah, and I don't know, we had the puppets, and I try, if I'm not non-stop, I'm doing, of course, photos with my telephone, yeah, but I still keep this value by choosing these analog elements, and it's different. Now I'm running this Polaroid crowdfunding thing for Photo London, which is a continuation of the idea from here, and I do only 2 photos, yeah, and it's fun because something is coming out and I cannot calculate it, yeah. And here is as well a brilliant story. That is Eva. She's actually a surgeon. And we took 2 photos, and we are wearing a wig. Like, I have one photo, she and me together, and that's the other one. And
I love this one so much. It's one of my favorites in the project. It's
yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting the way you talk about film, and it feels like it's really important for you to have certain fixed aspects of the project. Like, you always shot everything on film, you always shot it in a domestic space, but then everything else was kind of up for collaboration, and kind of it feels like you thrive on the unknowingness, like the unknown. It feels like that's really exciting and an important part of your practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And like here, I don't know, this is my friend Beatrice, for example. She was always cooking for me. She has a red kitchen, and that's why we decided, okay, I don't know, she was suddenly sitting on the table, and you see the lights, it was so dark. And I work with the light, what I find there. So it's random lamps and the pot, and I don't know, it's out of this unperfectionism, yeah, things are starting, and it is actually a collaboration, and I'm always very happy when it happens. Yeah, when you decide together how you set it up. Yeah, and and it's sometimes better to not to have everything. Yeah, not to have the perfect light, just to have something, and you play with it and you become creative with it. Yeah, it's yeah, I enjoy it. You know,
One of the
absolutely.
things I wanted to ask you about is, obviously, when I was introducing the project earlier, I talked about how you ended up visiting 19 different countries, and you explained about these different sort of lines that go through the project. So you could have been working, you know, you could have started in Barcelona, then gone to Tokyo, Kyoto, Sydney, Reykjavik, Berlin. There's these beautiful lineages that we'll see in a minute when we have a look at the graphics. But I was curious how or if your process or the collaboration itself differed when you were, well, I'm curious about the cultural nuance, basically. So as you moved from, say, Japan to Barcelona, was there a lot that changed about the project in terms of just cultural differences, or yeah, just the general energy of the project and kind of where you were at with it, I guess, as well, because at that point you'd been on the road for quite a long time?
Yeah, yeah. It's, I mean, each culture is different, each country is different, and of course, the everything would have been different if I would have started in a different city, or like the mix, of course, because it's like it's like, yeah, like what can I say? I got contacts from Barcelona to Tokyo, for example. But if I would have been in Tokyo first, then I probably would have become different contacts. Yeah, I mean, it's all, and then the next thing is, yeah, I got sometimes a lot of contacts, and I could reach only 10, and 5 had time, or like there's so many coincidences, things you cannot plan, and the time also. I think it was the perfect time to do the project. Yeah, because nowadays, I don't know if people will still be so open in a way. Yeah, and I had maybe also a good age, yeah, to do it, because I was not too young, I was not too old in a way. Yeah, and yeah, did
Yeah,
that answer?
yeah, it does. Yeah, it is really interesting. It's this project is really deeply embedded in time, I guess, like photography always is, in really interesting ways. And I would love to talk a little bit about a couple of the lines. I know one of them, I think, that you're presenting at Photo London is Berlin, Zurich, Reykjavik. And I know you had a story that you promised to tell me about
Oh,
something
yeah,
that happened in Reykjavik.
yeah, the Reykjavik story. Maybe we should see, I don't know which picture is it, but it's the picture with the lady upside down, the head. I don't know if it's possible to flip now through, and then I can talk. Yes, here. That's the Reykjavik picture. So sometimes I had for each city a target, yeah. And I flew to Reykjavik for 1 week, which is nothing, yeah. And my target was to meet Björk. It was like,
Big aim, big aim. I love it.
yeah. It was like, okay, because yeah, I had kind of this thing. I was Björk. I was like, okay, she's amazing, and of course I would have loved to meet her. And the only chance is to come via friends to get closer. So I landed in Reykjavik, and I was telling everybody, hey, I want to meet Björk. Do you have, like, there I was trying to direct it to get. And then one friend, he was like, I've heard Björk is in town. There is a chance. And I gave an interview for the daily newspaper, and he did. And so there was this really hype. And on my last day, I met her. This is Magustina. She's one of her close, like her early friends, let's say like that. She did the band Sugar Cube with Björk together. And So I got there, but I missed a couple of days in order to reach Björk. Yeah, but I got to her closest contact, but I had to fly back. So that was also destiny in a way, because I would have never changed the flight in order to get there. It was like, okay, I have 1 week, I try my best, and people were helping.
That's so funny.
It was really great, and she was fantastic. I mean, she performed. We did this photo. Yeah, my God.
One of the things that I wanted to talk about is um, this idea about how photography operates in this project. Because when I was thinking about it, there's something really interesting about the images versus the experience. Because you could actually look at this book and think the photographs are a document of a performance, if you like, rather than the photograph being the final thing. It feels like actually it was the connection, the relationship, the energy that you shared with these people, which is the work, and the photograph is the document or proof that that happened. And I wondered if you, well, I guess I wondered if that resonates for you at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, the photo, to do this photo shoot was the entry, that allowed me to come to see the person, to visit the person at home. Yeah, because I was insisting not to do photo shoots at work, to do it at home. And it is kind of the proof that it happened. And it was always the target. We needed to get there. There wasn't a meeting where I stepped out without a photo, except the last picture, which is a story by itself as well, which I didn't tell yet, because there I have, the photo lab did a mistake and I have a black picture. That's it.
So you knew it was done.
It was done, definitely.
We touched on this a little bit before, but there's something that deeply moves me about this project, not just in the gesture of what you did, where you were in your life, how you took a leap of faith, and everything that would have been involved, which I'm kind of entranced by, but also there's something very nostalgic for me about this. As somebody who grew up, for the first 15 years of my life, I didn't have the internet. And then since then, I've been very digitally based. And it feels like in some ways, this project and what it stands for is a relic for a previous way of living. Just thinking about how how you connected, like via the phone, through friends and friends, like that is very pre-internet connection and relationship building. And it feels like in some ways, the work is more pertinent now than it was when you made it, which is something I'm also always really fascinated about with art and photography. But is that something that you feel as well in terms of its relevance and perhaps its nostalgia and this sort of tribute to, or an accidental tribute to, a way of living?
I think, well, we cannot turn the clock back or front, yeah. And what is definitely very special is the way how it happened, and the commitment behind. Because nowadays it's like we are overwhelmed with, as you said already earlier, we are overwhelmed with images, with, like, there's constantly events and there's so much going on that I wonder how much we can digest and how much we can really take with us. And it's fast, everything is very fast. Yeah, and yeah, nothing is really sure. And when I did this project, I called people from phone in the street most of the time, yeah, from a coin phone. And it's so special. Or I traveled with maps. I have a collection of analog, like of maps, of city maps. And there was no Google who was telling me how to get from A to B. I was sitting in the cab in Mexico City and telling the driver how to get there, because he couldn't read. Yeah. And I don't know, that is very special. And I feel a bit sorry for the new generation, because they cannot step into this world. Yeah, it's impossible to go back. Yeah, but I also understand. it's a decision also in life. Like I decided I prefer to meet people, and I would prefer to have this talk in real. Yeah, like of course now it is pretty much real, but you know what I mean. Like sitting on a kitchen table could be differently, and I decided I do as much. I step as much out as I can, and that's why I was talking about my dinners, who I'm making, and I do a lot of effort in order to meet my friends and to spend time with them, and to use this also for my art. I always, if I mount up an exhibition, there's always a couple of people involved, and they bring good input for it, and I try to I like to work as a team. Okay, now this is maybe not the question, but I got a bit further. But
No, I think that's really interesting, though, how important those face-to-face interactions are for you personally and professionally. I think so, as we talked about, so much is done like through like digital networks now rather than IRL networks. It is really interesting how sort of sometimes closed digital experiences can be, partly because of the curatorial aspect of life that I mentioned before, but and how self-conscious we are now compared to, I think, like 20 years ago. But that level of also just happy accidents, like the unexpected that can happen as well, which I imagine is why this experience was so meaningful for you, or one of the reasons anyway. And I think as well, you know, building on from what I was just saying about technology, I think and how this project lands, you know, in 2024, we're living in an era of loneliness now. It's something we talk about all the time, which was exacerbated by the pandemic, but hasn't really been resolved by the pandemic being over. We're disconnected. We don't live in the same cities as our families anymore. So there's something about that as well, which I don't know, is like a beautiful reminder for me in this work to stay connected and how important that is to our quality of life. I want to make sure we have time to look at the visualization, so maybe we could skip forward and look at those, because that's a really fascinating part of this project, like being able to navigate the data. And I know you said you had kept a lot of the analog materials, like the maps and things like that, but then for the book you have, and the exhibitions, you've brought that together in a series of data visualizations, which give the viewer an idea of like which different lines you followed and what the project looked like as a whole. Can you talk a little bit about bringing data into this photo project and why that was so important for you?
Yeah. For me, it was important that people understand the complexity and of this project. Yeah, because I think what in the moment you see such a graphic, this is 100 line and 9 clans. I built it up like a family tree, but it's a friend's tree. And like each, well, you can't zoom in, but each frame is a person and a city and a date. And so this is one structure. And the thing why all this happened with the graphics was like I finished the project with the black picture. Yeah, I mean, it was really end of story in many ways. I came back from Warsaw. I was so happy to be back in Berlin and that it's over. And then I was, and someday I brushed my teeth like every day, and I had the idea, wow, I have done this. I have 340 people. I went to the photo lab by myself, and I did this, this prints. Yeah, like I have 1,000 prints about. And then I was calling my friend Henning, and I was asking him, what do you think? Can I exhibit 340 photos, even though the prints are not perfect? And he said, okay, let's talk about it. You can do it, but let's talk about it. And then we met, and then we started to discuss, and then I always was saying, I want to show everybody, yeah. And then we started to develop not an online version, but a standalone version, which you can click on the computer through. And he started to do the technical part. My graphic designer who did this beautiful maps, Tina, she did the graphic parts, and I was scanning all of the photos, and then we put it together. And you can there is a CD where you can click from each contact through, like the family tree, what we saw. You can go on, you can click through and there will appear the photo, and like this you will understand the connection. In the book, I have only half of the people in it, and I couldn't design the book like to show one line after the next one. It would have been a bit too boring, because it's a different, how you say, now I have a lack of words. It's a different, you say, a book is different than digital.
I guess there's different parameters, right?
Yeah, like it's a different way of showing something, and it needs a different approach. Yeah. So yeah, and because this friend could then we started, the three of us, we worked for 3 months to build up the first show. And so I was scanning, my friend was doing the design on top of her normal workload, and my friend Henning was programming it. And to get it to communicate who is who in the project, I needed to start with maps. And the first maps were like, my apartment here was full of this project, like prints all over, the maps on the wall. And I did it in order to find the structure and to communicate it with my friends. And this is how this whole order came out. And yeah, and I think it was amazing. It was amazing to work with my friends together. And the first show was just a knockout, because it was in, I think, October, then 3 months later after I finished. And then I went to Tel Aviv. So
looking at the data side of this project is where I see your architectural background come in, just thinking about frameworks and mapping and that kind of different side of our brain, which is really interesting. I was curious to ask you about working long term on projects, because I know when we spoke prior to this meeting today, you talked about how you kind of like to start a new project sort of roughly every 4 years, but these are really, you're really deeply invested in these projects. It's not something you do for like 2 months and then you move on. These are really long term. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about why working long term is so important to your practice.
well, it depends. Like, not every project is long term. Yeah, like I have some who are ongoing, because I like somehow the idea of documentation in a way, and to bring it in. And for documentation, there is long term. Yeah, like to see. I'm fascinated about like things which you can follow for decades. Yeah, like. And for me, to bring the documentation into, like, I have other projects where, like Ideal City, for example, where you can create your own city. And I have photographs from Berlin from 2003, which from buildings who are demolished now, but they were, historic wise, they were really value. Like the Deutschlandhalle, for example, a venue place. And people are very much connected, or had been connected, to this place. I photographed it, and it's there, but it's gone. So some projects to me need the long term and the endless idea, and some others are done on the spot. Yeah, like that's it. So
Talk a little, I know you touched on another project there. Just for those who can make it to Photo London and those that can't, I know this project that we've been talking about is one of 4 that you're presenting.
yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about the other 3?
So the other one is what I just mentioned, is Ideal City. I come as well with digital help. I come with an iPad where you can build it up, but we also have real pictures where you can build on the wall your own personal city. The other one is the DJ story from Tel Aviv, which I once did for LFE, Leica Photography International. And then it's the Polaroids, and the Polaroids will continue in London, because I will set shooting days. So everybody who will come to visit in London could be photographed. And this will be a growing project there, which is based a bit on the idea of a friend is a friend of a friend. So, and today is the last shooting in Berlin for those who are listening now, from 4 till 6.
How does that project, I know you mentioned it builds on this body of work, but where is that project going, which is different to this project?
Which one you mean now?
The Polaroid one.
The Polaroid was, it will end in London, because it was really set up to get some funding, yeah, and also to do again, to meet, like what you were mentioning before, that we lost it somehow to meet in person. And through this project, I give the chance. I set up little tiny events to meet and to take as well a photo home, yeah, to get something, and one will travel to London. But I will finish it in London, and so, but I will also present the photos like one big photo. I still work on it, because it will not be picture, picture, picture. It will be probably one big one or two big ones, or it depends on the space, what I have and how many will come. And maybe I will start to change them every day. I don't know. I keep it a bit open. Yeah.
I'm excited to see it. It sounds great.
Yeah. Come.
What I wanted to, before we open up for questions, I wanted to ask you a kind of emo question, but I think you know me enough now to know that that's kind of how I operate. But I was curious, like, how did the making of this work change you as a person, as an artist?
Everything. like
Tell me more than just that.
like in a way, it gave me confidence that you can just do things what you wish to do. You can dream and you can just do it. Of course, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of parameters around, but if I understood, if I really, really want something, I can do it. And I understood I have fantastic friends, and I understood about myself that I can be concentrated and I can do stuff by my own, but I also love to come back to the team, and I'm a team player usually. I like to work with people, and yeah, it showed me that I can just do it in a way, and to be open and to learn is very important. And my art teacher once said, if you feel bored, you have to change it. And that's a very good sentence, and it always comes back to me. And if I'm feeling I'm getting too much I need a break. Yeah, that's why I love breakbeat music, for example.
Well, we've had some questions come through. The first one is, could you tell us why you chose black and white, and whether any of your work is in color?
Yes, there is work in color, colored work. Like my movie Going to Jerusalem is in color, but black and white is at the end. First of all, I knew I will enter very personal space and people feel more comfortable with black and white. And then second, I just love how black and white, the grays deal with light and the whole aesthetics about it. Yeah.
And then another question is, were there any strange or difficult moments while making this project?
Of course, not that they are popped now into like, yeah, but not so many like you think. There are always difficult moments. Yeah, like you struggle. Oh, I need to make this phone call. You're tired. Then you're standing in front. Like I stood in front of people, and they were always different than I imagined them. So I had to overcome this, but I learned it. Yeah. And but there wasn't really a lot like weird moments. It was quite good.
Yeah, I think that's something to be said for the sort of roots of the project, right? Being all about interconnected relationships.
Yeah,
Someone else asked, how much control do you have over the development of your own images?
no control. I gave them to Photolab.
That's part of your process as well, I think, as
Yeah.
like again, it's sort of building on this collaborative nature.
Yes, exactly. Because I think there's people who can do it better than I can do it. And I totally believe in it, that I don't have to do everything, and I don't like to control everything. Like, I did the picture, and that's enough.
And someone else asked, what are the challenges of working with photography now for you, and how do you overcome them?
As we all know, due to the digital world, there's everybody who's taking constantly photographs, and I'm not getting into this at all. I keep concentrated, and I do only if I want to. I choose photography because I come from the painting part, so I'm not photographer. So I can also use others, but I'm not getting into this madness of, yeah. That's why I've chosen now again. I have chosen an analog camera to do something, and it's fun.
It's interesting. It's an interesting question someone said then, because I actually was going to ask you about anonymity, because I feel like while this project and a lot of your being in terms of, you know, we talked about how you love to host dinner parties and you're a very sociable person, there's also a level of you which to me feels like you also treasure anonymity. It's not like you do a huge amount of press around your projects. You're so much more invested in the work than necessarily the dance around the work, if that makes sense.
Yes, 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 absolutely.
And
Um,
there's a couple more questions. So one was, did you make any other documents other than the photographs or the portraiture of the person? Did you photograph the space or anything else?
no,
Um, as part of this body of work?
I did a few photos outside, like I had a second camera with me. Like, this was my backup camera in case something will happen. But I understood I was unable, like I went into 40 cities. I was unable to photograph the cities around me because I was so concentrated on who's next, who I will meet. Like, I go into a zone of concentration in a way. And I didn't want to document the apartment. It was about the person. Yeah.
I think we've got time for one more question. If
Okay.
anybody wants to drop one in the Q&A box.
That's a businesswoman, by the way.
Oh, really? This is another great one.
Yeah, there is also a story with the guy with a photo before. Maybe can we switch, or shall I answer a question?
No, you go, carry on.
That is Akira, and with him and the girl with the umbrella, that's his girlfriend by that time. You know, in Tokyo, there's the stress with the last metro. And we met, we went for drinks, and I had my camera and everything with me, and I was supposed to photograph Akira the next morning. And I lived in a different place than he was living, and this is Yokohama or something. Like, it's so huge. And then we got really drunk. Yeah, we got all really drunk. And then the only way was for me to just go with them. And so there was also another friend. We were four of us, and we were tripping with the last metro back to Akira's home, which was tiny, tiny. And I stayed with his girlfriend in the bed, and he slept on the floor. and and then that's her. And then in the next morning I had a huge headache. I was photographing Akira, and he slept there, and he got up, he combed his hair with a pink comb, and then we did these photos with the chairs, and he went off. And then I went with Siri to do this shooting, and we stepped out. And you know, in Tokyo you have all these slot machines for drinks, like, And then I bought her and for me a drink, like a coffee. And then we went to her parents' place where we were shooting this, but it was fantastic, you know, this, this whole journey with my Japanese, like Japan was a thriller. Yeah, like, wow, you couldn't expect this at all. Yeah, that was marvelous. Yeah.
We've had a couple more questions come in. One from Lena. What is your overall message or kind of intention with the project? And I would tack on to that. Did your intention change when you started versus where you are now when you can look back on the work?
I would just well, I can only say do what you feel like doing. Yeah. Go for it.
But did you have a specific intention of a message you wanted to communicate with this project? Or was it more about the doing of it, if you know what I mean?
It is much more about the doing, and I want people to do their own journey when they look at the pictures. To like, I have this is happening to me. I see something and then I'm floating and going somewhere else. Yeah, and I want to take people on a journey with the project. Like, yeah, like it's up to it's up to them, like how far, how deep they want to dive into it. Yeah, but yeah, and that's my message in a way.
Somebody else asked if this is the first time you're showing the work in London, and I think it is, right?
No, I showed it already in 2005.
Okay.
But yeah, in a completely different context. Yeah. So
it will be quite a unique experience at Photo London.
of course, absolutely.
And then someone said, how do you feel about presenting your work at an art fair?
I haven't really thought about that. I know fair is quite a thing. I'm not really a fair person. Yeah. And yeah, let's see. I see it as a chance. Let's see what will happen. I see it as a chance to meet a lot of people. Of course, it will be very tiring as I'm not a small talk person. So
yes, Birgit hates small talk, so you have to come with really good questions if you meet her at the booth.
no, well, come this time and have a coffee with me or something, but don't, yeah.
Well, I think that's probably a great place to end. Thank you so much, Birgit, for taking us through this project and sort of telling us more about the sort of fascinating interconnections within your practice. Thank you so much to everyone for your brilliant questions and for giving us some time on your Saturday to participate in this. Special thanks to Charlotte Jansen for inviting us to have this conversation and for Photo London for facilitating it. You can see the 4 projects that Birgit has talked about at Photo London in the Discovery section next month. And we hope you all have a beautiful day. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Gem, and the crew behind and everybody else for joining, coming. It was marvelous. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye. Ciao.